was talking about shapes rather than talking about the features of the face. But I do understand that people like to know where the features should be, generally speaking, on a face. Because if you don't have some basic idea of the structure of the skeleton of the face, then you're going to make some fundamental mistakes to start with. For example, many people, when they draw a face, they tend to put the features right near the top of the face, when in fact the eyes are more or less halfway down the whole face. Now, you may find that difficult to believe, and the reason that is the case is that we're programmed to actually look at these features here. We're forever looking at the eyes, in particular, the eyes and the mouth, because from an evolutionary perspective, we get so much information about people from those features. Are they angry? Are they happy? Are they in love with us? Are they dangerous? So we're constantly looking at those features, and that actually affects the way that we tend to draw the face. So this little demonstration is all about where those features should be in reality. So typically the eyes are in fact halfway down the face. And in that bottom half, typically the bottom of the nose is halfway down that space. And typically the mouth is halfway down that last quarter of the face. So the eyes are somewhere in this region, and they tend to, the bottom of the eyes tend to be at the halfway point. The end of the nose, the mouth. So when you're working on your face, as a sanity check, you should be thinking about roughly where these shapes, these features should be. Purely as a sanity check. If your eyes are up here, then you know you're going terribly wrong. Obviously, there's some variation in these distances, and that's why people look different. A few other key points you should be aware of is typically, certainly with Caucasians, white people, the corner of the eye tends to line up with the outside edge of the nose. And the mouth lines up somewhere near where the pupils are. Then of course, don't forget the eyelids, and then the eyebrows, and then the hair. So obviously this is just very, very basic. When somebody is looking straight out, the ears typically line up with the eye and go down to the bottom of the nose. So you can draw a face just using that little bit of information, and it's going to look like a reasonable kind of face. And in fact, cartoonists, they vary those proportions when they're trying to make people look silly or stupid or whatever. So typically on a cartoon, you might have the eyes way up here, the mouth way down here, etc. So obviously this is a cartoon, this is much more like a real person. Now the proportions of the face change depending on age. Children tend to have a rounder face. The eyes tend to be bigger. The nose tends to be stubbier. So that's how you may draw a child. An adult tends to have a longer face. The eyes, as a relative proportion of the face, are smaller. The nose tends to be longer. So if you're drawing a child, you may get a commission at some point to draw a child, and you think it's looking older than it should, and this is a common problem. It's because you are losing sight of the relative proportions of the faces. Children look much more like that than they look like this, and you may be thinning out the cheeks. You may be made, and typically you may have made the nose too long. So quite often people, when they're drawing children, will make them look more like an old man than a young child. So that's something to look out for. Now obviously the relative positions of these features depends on the way the person is looking. A person who is looking straight out at you will tend to be symmetrical. If they're looking down, the eyes are going to be lower. The nose will be foreshortened. The mouth will be less visible. This part is going to be relatively bigger. If they're looking up, their jaw will tend to be wider. The whole shape of the face will be different. the eyes will still be small. You see much more of the end of the nose, which is still foreshortened. Like so. If they're looking sideways, you'll see much more of the back of the head. The position of the features will be as in the forward looking, but it'll look much more like this. You'll be seeing much more of this side of the head obviously, and the rest of it is wrapping around the side. So that's just a few clues. Something else to bear in mind that I didn't mention before: the gap between the eyes tends to be the same width as an eye. If you draw eyes too close together, the person is going to look sneaky. If you draw the eyes too far apart, they're going to look simple. So just remember that the distance between the eyes is approximately one eye width. So that's a few little clues as to how you should be proceeding with your painting, the positioning of these shapes. Please always think of them as shapes, although we know that's an eye, that's a nose, that's a mouth. Think in terms of shapes. If I was to draw a shape like this, it hasn't got a name. So it's probably easy to draw because you haven't got any symbolic representation of that. So if I asked you to draw this shape, you would draw that shape. If I was to ask you to draw a dog, you might do some cartoon dog. And that is your right brain, sorry, your left brain, your logical, symbolic name has turned this thing called a dog into some comic book type representation of a dog. So when I say draw shapes, you actually draw what you see, not what your left brain wants you to do. So it's all about thinking differently. And this is a very important point. I've seen so many children who draw beautifully directly from life when they're young, and then they go to school and they start doing stick figures, Mickey Mouse. They start to do symbols. They stop drawing what they see they start to draw symbols of what they see, and I hope you understand the distinction there.